which?
The swinger house beckons.
You have no idea. As aggravated as I get with both of you being unable to manage your attention deficit disorder and interrupting the podcast constantly to the point where I can't get anywhere, for once, I'm going to read something to you, and I invite all of the squirrelness to come out. Please interrupt away as I read through this. So here we go. The many, many controversies leading up to Disney's live-action Snow White explained.
So what's the over-under on them just blaming men? How many times is that going to be a thing?
So let's skip down here to, has this movie always been mired in controversy? Pretty much. Peter Dinklage was one of its first detractors. The beloved actor, who has a common form of dwarfism, has had some choice comments about Disney's decision to adapt Snow White. In January of 2022, when appearing on the comedian Mark Maron's podcast, WTF, to promote the film Cyrano, which nobody saw.
I wanted to see that, actually. I thought it looked interesting.
You'd have been the only one. Dinklage accused Disney of hypocrisy when the topic of Snow White adaptation came up, expressing bafflement that the company was proud to announce they had cast a Latina actress as Snow White, but are still making that fucking backward story about 7 dwarves living in a cave together. I'd like to stop there and interrupt myself and say they don't live in a cave, they lived in a cottage.
One, yes, they live in a cottage. 2,
they work in a cave.
It's a fantasy land. There's dwarves, dickhead.
I was going to say that. See that's actually something that another dwarf comedian pointed out. He talked about how he always uses the term midget because he said when you hear the word dwarf, you go hi ho, and it just no, seriously, he actually used that in his stand-up, and he's
I think
not
I've
wrong.
seen that clip.
Was that Hornswoggle that did that, or was it another dwarf?
No. There's a comedian. His name's Brad something or other. I think.
Oh yeah, him. Okay.
Yeah, no, he's great, but
the one who has the bit about how dare you use my urinal? You know which one it is, you full-size jackass.
Okay. The one who basically got mad at a dad who brought his son over, claiming that he was one of Santa's elves. So he basically said, "Okay, fine. What do you want for Christmas? Whatever you want. Santa will bring it to you, right?"
Yeah.
He's awesome. But no, he pointed out that the use of the phrase dwarf. We got confirmation. Brad Williams. Thanks, Zach. Yeah, I've heard he is very nice. But he talks about how he doesn't like hearing the use of the word dwarf because it is mired in fantasy elements and Snow White and stuff like that. So even though that is the PC term, it just doesn't feel right.
Well, look, man, some of them went to dwarfism. Some of them still prefer midget. There's a few that just say, no, we're little people. Like, look, I don't care what you land on. Seriously, pick something. But call the quorum together and let's figure this out. But can we just finalize this?
Here's the real problem with Peter Dinklage's comments and Disney's response.
Oh, it got a bunch of. It meant they couldn't actually hire midget actors. Never mind, this is one of the few things with 7 good roles for working actors.
That's not the biggest problem. That's
I'll say, would they rather have done what they did with that horrible Kristen Stewart movie where they hired regular size actors and used forced perspective to go Hobbit on them? I think that's more insulting.
Well, it wasn't just forced perspective. They did a lot of CGIing to make them smaller too. And that movie pissed off the entire midget/dwarf community.
Here's the real problem is, one, if you look at what he really said there, it was like, it's great that they hired a Latino Snow White. So in the first part of the sentence, he's like, oh, this is great for inclusion is a wonderful thing, and I'm very happy for this. And in the second part, but you're still making Snow White, which I don't like because I think it makes little people look bad. It's never enough. This is the problem. This is why you don't negotiate with terrorists. True. This is why you don't give in to the mob mentality that demands inclusion above all else. I'm a fan of inclusion. I think inclusion's great. I think people should see themselves in various elements of media where capitalism supports it. That's the key.
I would say a lot of dwarf actors openly came out and said, "Please ignore what Peter Dinklage is saying. We need work." Look, there's already so few roles. It's a very limited market for people in
the reason
their
why
position.
Black people got where they got in entertainment and sports is because white people wanted to see them. Not because of a ratio, not because of a quota. It was people wanted to see Jackie Robinson because he was a superior athlete. This goes on and on. The amount of African American people that took over basketball, that made the Lakers what they were once upon a time.
It's funny what happens when the more you remove barriers and let things be a pure meritocracy. You actually do get the diversity that so many people insist on trying to get with quotas, altered standards, and pandering.
The grandfather of modern black comedy, the great 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 grandfather, Red Fox, was Red Fox all the way through, and people, despite being a black guy, wanted to see him perform, and he gave birth to Richard Pryor, who shared the stage with Bill Cosby, who both gave birth to Eddie Murphy, and it goes on and on and on and on.
And then we get to where we are now when everything's worse. Look, man, black comedy kind of died with Patrice O'Neal.
Anyway, my point
now we got Kevin Hart.
My point is Peter Dinklage, my point that I'm trying to get to is it's never going to be enough for the people who this is all they think about. It's never going to be enough for the people who they don't look at what the market supports. They only look at inclusion to the exclusion of all else. And there's never making any of these people happy. So Disney went out of their way to get rid of the dwarf characters and then replace them with, which we'll talk about in a little bit, the bandits, only for then people to see that and go, well, that's not really the story now, is it? This isn't Snow White and the Bandits. It's Snow White and the Seven fucking Dwarfs. And then Disney went, fuck. Like, now what are we supposed to do? And as you just said, Peter Dinklage is entitled to his opinion, but we don't work for Peter Dinklage and moved on from this and been adults about it. None of this would have ever have happened. But instead, you negotiated with a terrorist. You negotiate with a terrorist. I'm talking about this one isolated thing.
No. I was just going to say, like, that one item, you would have avoided that landmine. And you know what? Given how many you hit with your ragdoll physics, bouncing from one to the other, avoiding at least one would have helped a lot.
It was like the Daffy Duck Robin Hood method of making a film. Yoinks and away! Peter Dinklage. Yoinks and away! Rachel Ziegler. Yoinks and away! The Israeli-Palestinian crisis. Yoinks and away!
Yeah.
I was say, doesn't even make sense because Grumpy is actually voiced by Martin Kleba, a famous dwarf midget actor. You guys probably would recognize him from the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise.
I'll skip probably. The last time we spoke, you told me that Rachel Ziegler had upset a lot of people on TikTok in relation to Snow White, but I don't remember why. Could you rehash the whole saga? Boy. Ziegler didn't actually do anything untoward.
Okay,
the fact is,
once again, now the author is... Rachel Ziegler didn't do anything wrong by saying that the original is ugly, dated, and hurtful to the women's movement. And you know what? Really, we could just remove the male co-star from this in editing and nothing of value will be lost. No, she clearly didn't do anything wrong with any of that, right?
Okay, may I, as Rachel Ziegler's lawyer, speak up for her for just one moment?
I mean, you can try, but that's a losing case, buddy.
As Rachel Ziegler's lawyer, she was in friendly territory speaking to a reporter, and she was trying to be kind of affable and cute and funny. And the bit about the guy, she was being sarcastic. She wasn't being serious.
Oh, yeah. Look, here's the problem, okay?
I mean, let's not take it. Like, she wasn't reading from Mein fucking Kampf. All the woman said was, like, hey, we're doing a bit of a different thing here. We're doing a feminist take on Snow White. We may not even need the guy. You know what I mean? Look, if it's one of us saying it because we're not stars and we have, a fraction of the audience, no one gives a fuck. But it's a celebrity who said it who already had people against her. By the time that she makes those comments at D23 about we're doing a different take on this and the original is dated and we might cut the guy's part,
I couldn't even watch the original. It just scared me as a child. Like, okay, one, you're too sheltered, but
by that point, the wolves were already out for blood. People were all. First of all, this thing is coming on the heels of The Little Mermaid, with the lead black actress and the Caribbean aesthetic, which had already annoyed the piss out of people. This was already coming on the heels of everything I said about Star Wars and Marvel. So at this point, this could have been the best Snow White ever, the most accurate representation of the film. And I don't think anyone would. I still think you would have had people looking for reasons to attack this movie and everyone in it.
The problem is, like, I've said this before, when everything you do just makes the malcontents look like they're right, you're not helping anything.
No, and here's the thing, Robert. My contention is that even if they did everything right, people were going to look for things wrong with it. It just wouldn't have worked as well. The fact that this group of idiots lean into every mistake they could make is the problem here.
Here's my contention.
Mhm.
Everybody out there wants to be an actor. Delete your Twitter right now. If you want to start a new one, start a new one. Tweet very, 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 very infrequently.
Yeah.
And learn what it means to be the kind of person who has to carry the weight of a movie on your shoulders in public and in the press. This is lost, okay? Well, this is a lost art in Hollywood these days. You've got like 4 people who know what they're doing with it. None of them work for Disney.
Not entirely motivated to tear Rachel Zegler to pieces have been saying she lacked media training. And again, she's at a Disney convention. This is well before the movie was coming out, and she's having fun with the reporter, trying to be what's the word?
Adorkable.
Charismatic.
Well, she's not that.
Here's the thing. In the parallel universe where Marvel is succeeding and Star Wars is succeeding and these people aren't angry, nobody cares about that interview. Not a single person. No one gets bent out of shape about it. People took that ball and ran with it because they were already mad about stuff. But like I said, you take away that, and she's talking, first of all, people went digging for it. Because if you look at like when that started making the rounds, it was well after it was said. That was said at D23, what?
2022.
Yeah, 2022. It started making the it started making the rounds in 2023 because people looked for it.
Well, okay, again, like stop making it. Yeah, people had to look, but you didn't have to look hard. Like look, we're not talking about sleuthing here.
Yeah, look, again, could that have been worded better? Sure. Is it as bad as it's been made out to be? No.
No, not really, but like it feels like she saw Brie Larson do the I don't know, does anybody want me to be Captain Marvel anymore? And went like, okay, how about I do something in that vein, but worse.
I would buy that argument if she knew who Brie Larson was.
She saw the soundbite, didn't know who it was, but thought it sounded funny.
All right, so let's move down here. All right, so what else happened since then? An additional political wrinkle has developed. This is my favorite one, by the way. Gadot, it was Israeli and has served in the Israeli Defense Forces.
Okay, stop 1 second.
Isn't that compulsory service,
yes.
by the way? Okay,
yeah.
Good.
For the record,
I said that.
Just for every idiot out there who goes, oh, you're Israeli, you were in the IDF, therefore you're a terrorist, you're a moral reprobate, you're no different than the people running the camps at Auschwitz. Like, every military service in Israel is compulsive for literally everyone. Man, woman, whatever.
Yeah.
Nobody cares what you identify as. You serve in the IDF. Mandatory military service.
Right. That doesn't mean you see throwing that. That there's plenty of people who serve in the IDF that do like social service work, that do administrative work. It's a government service.
So throwing that as equivalent to a lot of other things, and don't get me wrong, if you want to quibble, if you wish to object to elements of how Israel governs itself and some of their tactics, standing, that is a whole very complicated, very, very messy can of worms. Not trying to say how you have to feel about that. I'm saying pretending that every person who served on the IDF is some moral reprobate, some monster who's like thrown babies off of cliffs.
Pretending that anyone from Israel, is
again, you have to.
My husband's best friend is an immigrant from Israel. He just took his wife and their 3 kids back this last summer to meet his family. I
love the fact that because they cast Gal Gadot, who was also Wonder Woman, who's also been in the Fast and the Furious movies, who was in a terrible Netflix movie, was also in Red Notice, but I repeat myself. But now, because she's cast as Snow White, and this is Disney, and people are paying attention, and protesting too much. Now this is Disney siding with the Israelis because they cast Gal Gadot, not because she looks good in the costume.
Honestly, she was probably the only truly good thing about this movie. She understood the assignment and she went with it.
You and I are going to disagree about that, but
Yeah,
we'll save it for that. We'll save it for later.
This is yet another example of you take a part and it ruins your fucking career because it what do you call it? It shows people who you. There's another word I'm looking for here. It exposes you for what you really are, and what she really is a terrible actress. But I digress. All right, so
point being, you have Gal Gadot, who's Israeli, was in the IDF, and has generally been pro-Israel. And Rachel Zegler,
as most Israelis would be, not all, but most.
For the record, Robert, it's Gadot. It's that
okay.
She's made it clear
right.
the T is not silent.
Meanwhile, Zegler has been openly.
Rachel Zegler has done what every 20-year-old has done and said, free Palestine. Okay, how? I don't know, free Palestine. Well, do you understand what that means? No, but we're pro-Hamas. Do you know what what that group calls for? Like, you can object to the implementation of what's going on in that part of the world, 1,000,000%. It's a mess. There's a reason we are where we are. But saying everyone and their dog doing Elon Musk made a Nazi salute and then ignoring that Hamas actively flies the swastika. I'm sorry, you're hypocrites.
So my daughter said something to me on the way home from school once when I went to go pick her up, and I
not a Musk fan, by the way. Just saying the duality.
And I said, who cares? And I said to Lily, I said, please don't be one of the Free Palestine people. And because she's not an international studies major, it's like she's an 8th grade girl. What? I don't understand. And I had to kind of explain to her in 50 words or less the Israeli-Palestinian thing.
Admittedly, do 8th graders even know where Palestine is on a map?
Nobody knows where Palestine is. It's next to fucking Oz, just short of fucking Rivendell. Jesus Christ.
Sorry, just your little explosion there. That was adorable.
Anyway, so she was just like, but why shouldn't Palestine be free? And then I had to throw books at her and be like, here, there's a whole thing. It's a lot more complicated.
It starts with the Bible, and in the beginning.
Oh dear God.
Anyway, it's a lot more complicated than the average idiot yelling "Free Palestine" from the rooftops, as you put it, makes it out to be. In any case, so you have this uneducated idiot yelling "Free Palestine," and then you have this Israeli going, "Maybe don't push us to the sea," as you keep suggesting we should do from all these terrorist groups.
And maybe don't genocide the Jews.
She's standing up for her home country. I mean, wouldn't we all do that for the most part?
In any case, apparently they were bumping heads. Zegler and Gadot have been bumping heads about that, which is hilarious to me.
And then there's, of course, Rachel Zegler telling half the country that don't come see my movie.
Oh, yeah. I read that part. Additionally, at least as far as domestic politics are concerned, Zegler has landed in hot water with Donald Trump supporters. The people who voted for our current president by a large margin.
Yeah. Look, you don't have to like Trump, but let's not pretend that he didn't win the popular vote as well as the electoral college.
One of the downsides of waiting 2 years to release this is they thought they were in safe, just like they did with Brave New World. The parallels to these two movies are amazing. But they thought they'd be in safe territory. We thought we'd be living in Kamala Harris land. And as it turns out, people in California still don't understand this country, lo these many years after Ronald Reagan was duly elected president. We don't learn from history. Anywho, landed in hot water with Donald Trump supporters after posting an impassioned anti-Trump message to her Instagram stories following the 2024 election. In it, Zegler finished her lambast of Trump with, "May Trump supporters and Trump voters and Trump himself never know peace." She was later forced to apologize at gunpoint.
Much like I was forced to be here if you saw our opening bit.
Usually drama between actors feels engineered in order to promote the movie, but this definitely feels different. How has Disney reacted to this growing controversy in the promotional run for the movie? Disney said hi-ho and practically took a sledgehammer. Oh, yeah. We haven't really talked about this.
Okay, hang on. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago when they canceled the European premiere red carpet event.
Right.
The next week, and this happened after our show, so we didn't get to talk about it, they canceled the New York and the Los Angeles premieres. There was no red carpet event.
They limited this to small screenings of only influencers, and Rachel Zegler did not talk to the press. She got to sing a song. That's it.
Yeah, they realized that Rachel Zegler has the charm of your average braying jackass down the street.
It's become clear that Hollywood just, well, not Hollywood, but audiences just don't like her. They don't want to see her. She was, everyone liked her in West Side Story, but that was an ensemble cast.
Also, that didn't do well, if you'll remember, Alexis.
No, it did not.
Yeah. Well, I think there was also, so I remember, there was also backlash on her because she didn't get invited to the Oscars that year. And she actually was publicly like, hey, I didn't get invited. And they issued a last minute invitation for her and she showed up. So I think that also kind of fed
I would like
into
to
it.
raise an objection.
She's been a self-righteous, self-entitled
I would like to raise an
character for a
objection
while.
as Rachel Zegler's lawyer. Because the common refrain from all the internet heads is everything she does bombs. Yes, West Side Story did not do well. It's not entirely her fault. Let's get a grip.
The Hunger Games prequel.
You know what did do well though? The last Hunger Games movie. I can pull it up if you want to, but I know our review did well. But if I remember correctly, it did financially well too. Yeah,
it wasn't it was not anywhere near a giant success, but it was not a money loser.
Yeah, I want to bring it up really quick. But she was in that promenently.
Well, she was prominently in the trailer. In the movie itself, this is one of our gripes.
I remember I wanted to ask you guys about that because somebody said that the trailer really overhyped how much she was in it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, we did complain about that. All right, so it had a $100 million budget and it made $349 million. Again, not a bomb.
Again, not a giant winner, but not a bomb.
So, the thing before Snow White, Y2K, that bombed, but it was an A24 horror movie that was out in the middle of Sonic, Wicked, Mufasa, a complete unknown, half the Oscar pictures. Like, it just got buried. Like, that, again, not entirely on Rachel Zegler either. So, this narrative that's out there because everyone hates her because of what we did to Marvel and Star Wars is everything Rachel is box office poison. No, I would like to remind the court who box office poison is. Her name is Margot Robbie.
Generally true.
Everything she touches turns to fucking ash, and we documented it with what you call numbers.
We
Put
did.
it on TikTok and everything. God damn it.
Yeah. Okay, so hang on. Counterpoint to your objection. Rachel Zegler may not be box office poison, but she is not a draw, she is not a star, and she is not an asset to any production she's been a part of.
I would like to raise another objection. Nobody is.
Yeah.
Oh, Robert. So
hang on.
Why did you pull up the tape of the last 5 years of us saying no, but there are no stars left in Hollywood?
No. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm saying that's a way too broad assessment to be like, oh, well, that's a little bit like saying, ow, my face hurts. And the response being, objection. Everyone with a broken jaw has their face hurt. Like,
I will acknowledge the point that if, let's say, there could be Hollywood stars in the year of our Lord 2025, she wouldn't be one. Maybe a better way to phrase that, since you're right, there are no stars. There are actors with goodwill, though. Sure.
And she has none.
That would be correct. I don't know how much, and Alexis was starting to say something about this. I don't know how much goodwill she had before 2022, but she certainly has none now. And she's going to have to go through the Brie Larson witness protection program / rehab program to make it, to get gigs in Hollywood again.
Pretty much the only asset she has is she is a phenomenal singer. I will give credit. I didn't like the songs in this movie, but she sang them well. I mean, she sang the songs in West Side Story well. I don't know how her singing was in the Hunger Games prequel because I didn't see it, but I heard she sang well.
This girl
in that.
Can sing. That there's no one's doubting that. In fact, even the people who hate her, hate this movie, and hate everything coming out of Disney because of their precious things we're muddled with, have all said she's the best part about this movie, which I disagree with, by the way.
No,
as her lawyer, I don't think she's good in this, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes.
Here's part of the problem with some of these live action movies, and we'll talk about this when we get to it more specifically. Rachel Zegler can sing. Her acting is very, very dubious.
Yeah.
Disney at this point is hiring people that can sing and hoping that no one cares that they can't act, and it's backfiring big time.
All right. Well, that is our discussion of the great controversies that have plagued history's great art piece. The touchstone of culture.
Okay, hang on. Before you get too deep into that, let's do at least two things here that are important to mention.
What? What do you want?
The original Snow White is, in fact, an important cultural touchstone and piece of cinema history.
Yes, which I wasn't
and
talking
music
about.
history too.
Yeah.
I was talking about this movie, not the 1937 classic.
Oh, okay. You were being sarcastic about this
Disney.
one.
Yes.
Well, I thought you were about to do your. So now let's talk about how this movie, that how dare they, and then you're like being moderately sarcastic about everyone's reaction to what they've done to the original.
No, I've made my point. These guys are halfway full of shit and halfway intellectually immature. And as somebody who can rub two brain cells together and formulate an educated thought, it bothers me, and I'm entitled to be bothered.